Welcome to the Retirement Planning Show, your source for financial strategies to help you retire with confidence. Featuring Chip Coughlin of Retirement Income Analysts in Syracuse, New York. Chip is a registered representative, and securities are offered through LPL Financial, member of FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Stratus Wealth Partners Ltd. Retirement Income Analysts and Stratus Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. And now, here are your co-hosts, Matt Halloran and Chip Coughlin.
Hello and welcome to episode number 13. We're going to talk about the 12 financial pitfalls of divorce. This is going to be part one of two, the first 6 pitfalls. We're doing this with Chip Coughlin. Chip, how are you today? And you just had something pertaining to this happen this past weekend, right?
Absolutely, Matt. Good talking with you. We did this past Saturday, we call it a Second Saturday Divorce Workshop. It's a workshop that is presented nationally, and it's in agreement with the Women's Institute for Financial Education, and it's the oldest, most trusted nonprofit devoted to female financial literacy. And we just put on this class last Saturday, and it was well attended, and we heard a lot of very sad stories. And as I told everybody on the front end of the class on Saturday, I want them to walk away from the class and be strong, aware, confident, and organized.
So divorce is about family, emotion, and money, not the law, but it's probably the biggest financial transaction most people will have in their life. So let's break down these first 6 pitfalls, and the first one really does have to do with money. So what's number one?
Well, number one is not enough cash. And we talk to clients about this, that money makes us more secure and cash buys power. Power in the sense that you can stand tall. You're not crouching down looking for pennies. And I would tell you that divorce is a very cash-hungry process. There are filing fees, attorney's fees, retainers, perhaps a mediation fee, maybe an apartment rent, and also counseling costs. So having some cash and stockpiling some cash in anticipation perhaps of the divorce makes a lot of sense. And it's really difficult, Matt, because if you don't know this is coming, then how can you plan? But If you're planning, you can stash some cash before you move out of the house. You don't want to conceal it. You just want to control it. We're not saying to anybody to be dishonest about this, but we want them to be prepared.
Okay.
And I think that goes a long way. But there's other sources of cash that are involved in this. It could be a home refinance, and you need to control where those proceeds go. There's credit cards. You want to become your own person, of course, but you want the credit card in your name. From the date you're served divorce papers, you don't want anybody else spending money that would have your name attached to it in any possible way. So the joint credit cards, those are going to end on that day. Everybody needs a credit card and a debit card, so you'd have to go and get your own credit cards just in your name because you don't want to be on the hook for what somebody else did from that point forward.
Okay.
And I would say, in anticipation of a divorce, you want to pay off bills from the joint funds before you leave so they're not really hanging over your head, and you have to be prepared. In the class on Saturday, there was a couple women there, and my heart just broke for these women because they were standing on the train tracks and didn't see the train coming down the tracks. And they were very dutiful wives, and the husband just pulled the rug out from underneath them. And they were stunned, and they communicated that. And it was a very emotional time in this class because many of the women will tell their story or a piece of their story. And there's commonality there, but many of them didn't see the train coming down the tracks and got hit by it. Got blindsided, basically. And so there really was no time to prepare and stash cash and things like that. But you got to do the best you can. And if you feel an inkling, then you've got to be proactive to take care of yourself.
You just said that a lot of these women who attended the class this past Saturday, everything kind of came out of left field here. But number 2 pitfall is too little preparation. How can you prepare for something when you have no idea it's coming?
Well, I think it's part of the planning process that we talk to people about is you have to be aware of all the financial aspects of your married life. You have to be aware of how much you have in a mortgage. What is the mortgage rate? Do you have a home equity line of credit? What does our budget look like? How much are we saving? Do you have a savings account? Are there IRAs in each of your names? Are there 401ks? what do they look like? So we want our clients to be prepared. If it comes out of the blue, you've really got to work quickly and diligently to gather all that information. So we tell them before they leave, talk to the attorney, of course, talk to a professional, financial professional, and discuss your options, what is going on. We also say that timing is important. If it's after a bonus or a lawsuit settlement, after you've reached the 10-year mark for Social Security is very important. If you're married for less than 10 years, you don't have a claim on your spouse's Social Security. But if it's over 10 years, you do have a claim. And ultimately, when you retire, that's going to be very, very important. So we want to plan. We want to prepare. But if you're blindsided, you have to be very proactive right from that time forward and say, I've got to get in the know. I've got to know about all the stuff that's going on with my family financially, with my marriage financially, so that I can be prepared.
Now, pitfall number 3 ties right into that too, which is making sure you know where all of your stuff is, your legal stuff, your records.
Yes,
how do you help with that?
Well, it comes in. You have to be aware. And if you can gather all the records, all the financial records of your marriage, you can be confident that nothing has been thrown aside or hidden under the rug or something like that. So you need to make a copy of everything. And I'll give you an idea. One of our new clients is in the process of going through a divorce, and her husband said that he had a very large collection of guns, and he would occasionally say, oh, my gun collection is worth $250,000. And I said, with your phone, take a picture of every gun that he's got, because when you go to the table with this divorce, that gun collection that he said is worth $250 is now going to be worth about $2,500. So you need to have records. So get copies of the tax returns, because if there is information on dividends and capital gains on the tax return, that's related to an account that you may or may not be aware of. So get copies of tax returns from previous years. We say that the tax return is a treasure map that shows you where the assets are and how much the income is. Because if a spouse says, oh, gee, I only made $52,000 last year, and yet on his signed tax return, it says $152,000, now you've got something to talk about. Because he signed the tax return attesting to that was his income. So to come back and say, oh, no, that's not it, you can show a little history there. We tell our clients, again, it's prepare. We tell them to analyze their spending for at least 2 years to establish a standard of living and to help you budget for your life after the divorce. Many times clients will come into me within the divorce process and they'll say, how am I going to live? What am I going to live on? And we want to know how they lived previously. It's a function of what they earned, and we have to have a budget to show what those expenses may be on a go-forward basis. We would like the client to list all their assets with who bought them, when they bought them, and what the perceived market value is right now, as well as any debts on those. So if you have a car, it's a 2014 car, it's a Camry, I paid for the down payment back in 2014, and I've made the monthly payment every month all along, and I think Kelley Blue Book says it's worth this right now. You want to have those facts so they can't be disputed. If you've refinanced a loan, find out when that was done, who makes that payment, have a list of all of those. And if you have a loan application, again, like a tax return, a loan application lists all your liabilities as well as your assets. And again, when you apply for a loan, a mortgage, both spouses sign that, attesting that this is true to the best of their knowledge. And if they try to say, I don't have this income or I don't have this asset, it's right there on the loan application. All right? And you'd want to assemble all the documents you need to trace your separate property. Who bought it? When you bought it? Who paid for it initially? Who paid for it along the way if you financed it over time? So records are very important. And I would say in today's society, phones have an amazing capacity to take pictures of everything. But I would take it one step farther, Matt. I would take those pictures and make copies and keep them in a safe place.
Okay.
2 different locations. Because if somebody comes in and takes your divorce file, you don't want them to get everything and you'd be left with nothing. So
Sure.
You want to take those, put them in a separate place, give them to a trusted family friend or relative, something like that, so that you know for sure that you will not lose the paperwork and the records that you have.
Pitfall,
Many times in a divorce, it's who comes in with the better records is going to have the upper hand.
Well, pitfall number 1 was not enough cash. Pitfall 2 is too little preparation. Pitfall number 3, as you can see here, everybody, that these are really weaving together. And pitfall number 4 is assets. And you've touched on this already, that there are times where the most important thing is not to overlook assets. How do you tease that stuff out?
Well, and again, if you have some time to plan, you can get ready. As we said earlier, if this hits you out of the blue, you've got to regroup and charge. But smaller assets, such as jewelry, that might be in a safety deposit box. Okay, you want to go to the box with your phone, do an inventory of everything that's in it, because you don't want any of those things to disappear. And somebody says, "Oh, what are you talking about? I never had that." Well, no, here's a record of it. Here's a picture on this date from this safety deposit box. You got to have that. But let's look even at some finer points. How about frequent flyer miles? You accumulated those while you're married. They would be a joint asset. They do have a value. How about deferred vacation and sick pay? Okay, how are you going to handle those? Because, again, those are an asset and they're many times overlooked. Take another example. If one of the spouses owned a business or had a side business, how are you going to value those? Do you value through a tax return? Do you value it based on equipment purchased? There's many different ways you can look at that, but that all has to be inventoried. If it's a lawn mowing business on the side, and they could say, "Oh, my lawn mowing business isn't worth much." Hold on. There's a trailer. There's 3 walk-behind lawnmowers. There's 2 tractors, and there's a shop where you keep all of those. Try and get a picture of all that, because it all has a value. If they have a business that is geared in a different way, you've got to look and see, is there marketing for the business? Where is it sited? Meaning, where is it located? What does the office look like? Are there other partners? Is there any records that would show disbursements from the business? Because those would tend to leave us with a value of the business. You know, if the business is kicking off $25,000 a year, the business is worth 3 times that or something like that. So how are you going to value that? Another overlooked asset for many clients is retirement plans. Many times each spouse doesn't know what the other one has in their retirement plan. So what are they worth and how are we going to divide them? We had someone in the class on Saturday, and the discussion focused on retirement plans with her, and her husband had a retirement plan that was 2.5 times larger than the plan she was in. And it was mostly a function of he had a higher income, so there was more money going into his retirement plan. Well, through the divorce process, if you've been married for a while, they're going to even up those retirement plans through what we call a quadro. A quadro is an abbreviation for a qualified domestic relations order, and it's a way to transfer retirement plan assets from one spouse to another in a tax-free way. So the husband had 2.5 times what the wife had, so they had to even those up. So they got a quadro was prepared by the attorneys, and what they did is they took a big chunk of his retirement plan and shifted over to her through the quadro into an IRA rollover account. So it's a tax-free transfer. It goes into an IRA that has tax-deferred growth, and it's going to be there for retirement. I'll tell you, let me give you an example, Matt. One of the women in the class, her husband put it to her that he could have half of his retirement plan or she could have the family house. And I said, "What do you think about that?" And she goes, "Well, I need a place to live." And I said, "Let me ask you a question. How much has your house appreciated in the last 5 to 10 years? And we're in Syracuse, and the appreciation on that property has not been dramatic. But if you look at the appreciation on his retirement plan with this almost 9-year bull market that we've been in, it's been fabulous. So to trade the retirement plan for the house, you can even those up at the time of the transfer, but on a go-forward basis, it would seem that the retirement plan would grow much faster than the house. I didn't want her to be given an asset that wouldn't grow as fast as the retirement plan. And we kind of said you have to come in and see us so that we can do an evaluation on that and give you a possible or probable scenario. How about furnishings, vehicles, jewelry, hobby equipment? The hobby equipment could be a workshop with woodworking tools. What are they worth? Again, take a picture of everything in there. A picture inventory is very important. It could be a motorcycle, a four-wheeler or something like that. What is that worth? Well, there's a Kelley Blue Book for motorcycles, and you can determine the value. Take a picture of the odometer on the motorcycle. How many miles does it have? Because that's going to directly correlate to its value. Take a picture of the license plate and perhaps the registration, if you can get your hands on it, to show what year it is. So between the year and the mileage, you'll be able to come up with a value for that motorcycle. Jewelry is a tough one. I know in my family, my wife has all the jewelry and I have none. And, that's just the way it is. But many times in families, the male and the female both have jewelry. And if you can get a picture of that and it has a value on it, and where did it come from? Who paid for it? What did they pay for it in the front end? What is it worth today? Would be very important. And then ultimately the furnishings of the house. Sometimes in a divorce, people are downsizing. The furniture has a value and it could be sold, or some of it could be sold to generate some cash. And what is that really worth? So we want the client to be aware and not overlook any asset, no matter how small, because it can be used as a bargaining chip in the process.
With all of these assets that could be strewn all over the place, pitfall number 5 seems the scariest to me. Obviously, the divorce is going to be traumatic, but from a financial consideration, pitfall number 5 seems to be one of the deepest pitfalls.
Well, it is. And the federal government really doesn't care if you get divorced or not. They still want to get their tax on everything. So the tax consequences can be a major hurdle. And if you are the spouse that was not involved in the yearly preparation of the income tax, it could be an area where you're very insecure, you don't know how it works, and that's where you have to have good representation. But think about the tax consequences of keeping or selling a home. There's a $250,000 exclusion of gain for each owner-occupant. So what is the house worth today? You can get an appraisal. You can go on Zillow. There's many different ways to do that. Call your friend who's a realtor. Hey, give me a best case and a worst case scenario. What's the home worth? If you own any rental property, it could be worth a lot less when you consider income taxes. You'll have to pay when you sell it. So what is it really worth if you have to liquidate the rental property? And anytime you have to sell something fast, you never get the right price. How about taxability of support? Child support is non-taxable, all right? So paying to keep your kids dressed and fed is non-taxable, non-deductible. But alimony is taxable to the person paying it, or taxable to the person receiving it, and deductible to the person that is paying it. And again, planning correctly, having good advocates on your team, so to speak, you're going to have some negotiating power there on how long the alimony will last and how it's paid. So I think that's important. Lastly, in this category would be filing a joint tax return. If he didn't report all his income, should you file jointly? And when you sign a joint tax return, both you and your spouse are attesting that that information is correct. And if he's hiding some information or hiding some income from other sources and your name's on there, you're liable as well. And you got to watch out for that. If within the spousal relationship, you were the person that did the taxes, the other spouse, while they're on the tax return and their signature is on that, they may have some innocence there if they were unaware of how it was filed. But that's a tough one. And so you want to play that one pretty carefully. But I would say as soon as possible, you don't want to file a joint return if you're getting divorced, because you need to worry just about yourself and not about what anybody else in the game that they're playing. So we tell our clients as soon as possible, watch out for that. As an example, Matt, we had in Rochester a client get divorced, and the wife got the house. The husband, he moved out. The wife subsequently remarried and bought a house with the proceeds from her initial house. And they bought a house in the New England area, and she somewhat took on, emotionally or otherwise, the poor decision-making of the new spouse. And so she had to come to terms with, listen, we're married now, but I'm definitely not going to bail you out of a self-created situation. So with our guidance, we gave her the game plan and the dialogue to say, gee whiz, I want to stay married, but we've got to make some hard decisions about some of our premarital, the spouse's premarital assets and the liability that those represent.
So we've been talking about the 6 out of the 12 financial pitfalls of divorce. Number 1 was not enough cash, too little preparation. Number 3, no records. Number 4, overlooking assets. Number 5, which Chip just got done with, was ignoring tax consequences. And this last one is where I think a lot of people fall into, because it's almost out of sight, out of mind. Hey, I don't want to deal with this, so ignorance is bliss. Help our listeners understand how that is a pitfall and what they can do about it.
Well, ignorance is bliss, but they say it doesn't hold up in court. So you want to learn as much as you can about the legal process and how divorce works in your particular state, what documents you need to gather, the various ways to get through the divorce. It could be litigation, it could be negotiation, mediation, collaborative, do-it-yourself, and things like that. And if you went to Barnes & Noble, you would find several books that could be a resource for you if you wanted to give them a read to get up to speed on what's going on. And as I said in the beginning, we want our clients to be confident. So when they come to our second Saturday divorce workshop, they're leaving with a working model of how the divorce process works and what they should be aware of. But the second point here is learn about your finances inside and out. I know in many situations, the husband is taking care of the finances, the wife not so much. They have to really get in there and get an understanding of what's going on, the relative position of the assets, and how they can use those assets on a go-forward basis to live their life. But you have to review the credit card choice charges, debit charges on bank statements to get a feel for what the expenses are, review brokerage statements and see what's been deposited or perhaps withdrawn over the last year or two. You want to look for withdrawals from bank accounts and investment accounts that you can't identify what they were for. Was my spouse funding a different relationship from these accounts and he thought I'd never know? You have to do, sometimes we call it some forensic accounting, where you have to look back over multiple years and see money in, money out. And the money out, where was it going? Did you know about it? Did you discuss it? And then make a list, and that your spouse has got to account for that. So you're going to need a financial professional to help you with that. I think you also have to learn about the family and emotional issues. We had a licensed marriage and family therapist at our class on Saturday, and it was very, very helpful because there's a lot of emotional baggage with a divorce. So you got to find a counselor perhaps and talk to them about how to handle your spouse. And again, sometimes in divorces, people get very angry. You've got to set your limits, what you will and won't tolerate. And is there a way to improve the communication style? You want to make sure that the children don't get caught up in the mix and how the divorce is affecting the children. And that's a big thing, how to talk to your kids and what message you want to give to the kids. If you can do it in a joint fashion where two concerned parents are telling their children about the future, you can make the kids comfortable with what's going on. I don't think they're ever comfortable initially, but you want to assure them that obviously, the parents still love the kids and things like that, but that there's going to be a change. And in the kids' minds, this is a drastic, dramatic change. And so some counseling from a licensed marriage and family therapist might help them get through that. And then the last thing I would mention here, if you're a working spouse, is there a way that you can improve your employment situation to augment your income? So think about this. Get your resume, improve your resume, work on perhaps looking for a new job or working in a more specific specialized area that will generate more revenue to you post-divorce. So again, you have to be your own advocate, and you have to take the bull by the horns and represent yourself correctly. You don't want to just sit there and wonder what's going to happen. You have to get out there and be aware. So we started today, when people come to our workshop, we want them, when they leave, to be strong, aware, confident, and organized. And those four adjectives really dovetail into what we've talked about so far today. And I think it's very, very important to not be the victim here and be aware and be confident so that your self-esteem is not dinged by this and you see yourself as a strong, aware, confident, organized person.
All right. Well, Chip, thank you very much for episode 13, the first part of the 12 financial pitfalls of divorce. We covered the first 6 today. Stay tuned and we'll cover the next 7 through 12 next time. Chip, thanks for your thought leadership.
Okay, Matt, thank you.
And stay tuned for the next podcast coming really soon.
Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Stratos Wealth Partners, a registered investment advisor. Stratos Wealth Partners and Retirement Income Analysts LLC are separate entities from LPL Financial. Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly.